one from the Rhythms of the Night CD. And there's a prophecy that says, when the eagle of the north and the condor of the south fly together, Mother Earth will awaken. And this song is called Eagle and Condor.
Douglas Bluefeather, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's funny, right? On this journey, I so wanted to meet someone that was had ancestry or was Native American in some form or fashion. I don't know, I just had that calling to bring that on to this documentary that I've been filming called They Call Us Channelers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the connection through Pat Zimmerman, which you'll be on a previous interview or a soon-to-be interview, connects us to yourself. And I'm just so grateful. Just seeing you perform as well, and we'll show a little clip of that. It was absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Pidamia.
Pidamia. So your upbringing then, you know, you was born into your mother and father. Which one had the Native American?
My native ancestry is on my mother's side. I remember the day when I was 5 years old, out front of my house. I was born in Akron. I wasn't born on a reservation. So I remember the day when she said, the reason you get so tan so quickly in the summertime is because you have native blood. So I grew up in an inner city as just a normal kid, but I was always drawn to native things. When we would go on vacation, I always wanted my picture taken in front of a native statue or in front of a teepee. I was always drawn to those things. But it was in 1996 I had a very profound spiritual awakening which really connected me to my native heritage and put me on what we call the Red Road, the Native American spiritual path.
What was that experience?
It happened at a Unity church when I heard that 2 Native Americans from New Mexico were coming in. He was promoting a new book, and they were doing a lecture, a teaching circle outside, and afterwards they were doing a sacred pipe ceremony inside the sanctuary. So after the lecture we went in groups of about 6, and I was towards the end of about the next to the last group. And when it was my turn to go up and pray with the sacred pipe, the chanupa, I was shown how to handle it. This was my first experience with native ceremony and with the native prayer pipe. After I prayed with it, the lady on my right turned to me and said, "Can you stick around for a few minutes? We have one more group to go, but I need to talk to you." And I looked at her and I said, "Sure." I had no idea what she wanted to say. So I went out into the lobby. I was only out there for a few minutes, and she said, Spirit literally picked me up and said, "No, go talk to him now. Don't wait." And she said, "While you were praying, Spirit told me to take something out of my medicine bag and give to you." And she said, "No. A medicine bag is your own personal medicine. I'm not going to take something out of mine and give to anybody else." She refused. Spirit came again and said, "Take something out of your medicine bag and give to him." And she said, "No." The 3rd time, Spirit came and said, "Take something out of your medicine bag and give to him." So she considered the 3rd time from Spirit as confirmation that she needed to do this. She took it out and gave it to me, and she said, "This is for your protection." And all I could say was, "Thank you, I love you." So I put it in my medicine bag, what became my own medicine bag, along with some other sacred objects of my own. I carried it with me wherever I went. I was a Dayton police officer at the time. If I would leave home and forget to take it with me, if I was 2 blocks away, I would turn around and go back and get it. And I would keep it in my shirt pocket. It looked a little funny hanging from a gun belt. So I always carried it with me. And people ask me if I channel music, but I had a very profound experience one evening while I was on duty, if I could share that with you. I had read about native spirituality now that I had been on the road, on the Red Road, because when I met those 2 natives, that put me on the red road, the Native American spiritual path. I wasn't looking for it, it came to me. And when that happened, I started to have all kind of things happen, unexplained things happen, phenomenon happen. It's when I received my name, Blue Feather, from a vision. A spirit guide came to me in a very profound vision. He had 2 blue feathers hanging from his hair and took one and gave to me and said, "This is from the wings of Mother Earth, the blue planet. Your name will be Blue Feather." And that was a year before I even picked up the Native American flute. So I carried that name with me. But getting back to the experience I had of being what we call a hollow bone. Anybody who's a channel in the Native tradition, we say they're a hollow bone, a hollow vessel for spirit to work through. Whether you're a healer or channeling information, you have to be open, you have to be clear, you have to let the spirit come through you to work, to do the work. So it was an evening. I had an inside assignment at the time, and the city council thought that if they pulled all available inside personnel, put them in uniform, put them back on the street, they could prove that we need more police officers on the street to handle more call loads. So they wanted to have more of a show out there, more of a show of presence. So the first night nothing happened. We were just sitting around kind of doing nothing. The regular officers were taking calls. We were kind of bored. The second night a call came out. We're on the west side of Dayton. An undercover drug unit was sitting up at a gas station watching some drug activity, and a pursuit started, which got them southbound on I-75, a major highway through Dayton. And at the time I was riding with another partner, and he said, "Let's go, we're going to jump in on this." So we fell in on it. By the time we got there, the scene had come to an end. The bad guys had lost control of their car and run off the road into a ravine. And by then it was more of a rescue mission to find them and give them medical attention. So after that whole scene was taken care of, there was the accident scene to take care of because a motor vehicle accident had occurred with them running off the highway. So the person that I was with was actually the officer who took care of traffic accidents that required a lot of additional technical assistance and things. So we were in his car. He had all his additional technical equipment to do measurements and everything. So he said, "I'm already here. I'm going to handle the accident." Normally, if it's just something typical, the street officers handle it. But something a little bit more serious, they have a special investigator do it. So I was just stuck there because he was going to do it. I was sitting in his car, and I was sitting down close to the exit, and I was reading a book. I brought a book with me because the night before I'd been kind of slow, and so I thought, well, if nothing else is going on, I might get a couple of chapters of this book read. So I was sitting there, and I was reading about how the sweat lodge, the inipi, represents resurrection. And all of a sudden, a fire truck came running up the exit, coming up the wrong way. And I knew that when they came up the wrong way, it was because they couldn't get to a scene from behind because traffic was blocked. So I said, "What happened?" I yelled out the window to somebody, and he said, "A police officer just got hit by a car." So I immediately jumped out of the car I was in. I ran back, and I saw it was a Moraine police officer, which is the small town just south of Dayton. And about a half an hour prior to that, I had passed this man on the highway. We were both up there putting out flares. And I looked at him, and I looked him in the eye, and I just smiled and walked past. And now I was looking at him dying on the highway. He had been hit by a car that was looking and rubbernecking and not paying attention, and hit him and threw him about 100 feet. And there was brain matter on the ground. And the paramedics were frantic. It was like they're working on their extended family. Like they were having a hard time functioning. There was no heartbeat, no pulse, no breath. One of the paramedics asked me to take his bulletproof vest off, so I got that off. And as soon as I did that, I took that medicine bag that I always carried with me, containing that object that I had been given just about 6 months earlier. And I placed it over his heart, and I started to pray. And within a matter of seconds, they were still having a hard time getting a tube down his throat to open up an airway. I could feel his heartbeat coming up through the medicine bag, and I could feel it through my hand. And then I felt something incredible. It felt like lightning coming through me, just spikes of lightning and energy that came through me and back into his body. And Source talked about that last night when he said, if the spirit doesn't go 3/4 of the way, they can come back. And I felt his spirit come back into his body through me. And I picked up my medicine bag because a care flight helicopter was there, and they tapped me on my shoulder. And they'd been watching me do all of this. And they said, let us take it from here. So I took that medicine bag, put it back in my pocket, and I walked down the highway, still in kind of awe and almost shocked myself as to what I just experienced. Because I knew that I was a hollow bone that felt his spirit come back through me into his body. And I looked up, and I looked at the stars, and I said, God, if what I think really happened really did happen, I said, that was you. I was just the vessel that allowed it to happen. So I went to the hospital afterwards to see what his condition was. I just kind of stayed quiet, but the word got out quickly about what had happened. And his family sought me out, talked to me. Other officers from his department sought me out, talked to me, and the doctors didn't know why he was still alive, but they all said, we know it was because you were there that night. So that was an experience that I'll never forget. It changed me. And it wasn't long after that I became interested in the Native American music. I'd been a musician since I was 14, played the drum set. So I became interested in the Native American flute. And I really think had I not had that spiritual experience, I would have never picked up the flute. So the native spiritual path came to me first. So to me, my music has always contained a spiritual aspect. And I think that's why it touches people the way it does. Because it's more than just me playing a piece of wood with 6 holes in it. It's like there's a spirit that comes through me that allows me to do what I do with this. When I first picked it up, it's a very simple instrument to learn. And I've taught thousands of people over the years, but when I first picked it up, it felt very familiar, like I had done it before. So it came quickly to me. And I started playing in nursing homes and hospice. And back then we were still listening to cassette tapes. One of the staff said, "Do you have a tape out?" And that kind of planted the seed. So a year later, I had my first CD out. So I had this experience in 1996 and my first CD out in 1997.
So you was always into music. This experience then transformed you to native Indian music. I almost want to talk about as well, was there ever anything in your family's lineage where they had any musicians in as well?
No, I was the only one.
Was your native Indian background discussed in the family?
Not much. I came from a generation of parents, like so many people from that time period. They hid their heritage because when they were growing up, it was kind of a strike against them to be considered Native American or any minority. Minorities were struggling. The black culture especially was struggling during that time. So it was not discussed, other than I knew that it was there because my mother told me so. So after I had that experience and that awakening with the sacred pipe, I really started my own journey as far as what's this all about. I started reading, and that lady who gave me the sacred object from her medicine bag, she was Apache. she became my teacher that day. So she was my teacher for several years. I read a lot. When I first started reading, I was attracted to the teachings of the Lakota way, the teachings of Black Elk and Fool's Crow, very powerful medicine men. I was drawn to the ceremony and the healings that they did. And I felt very familiar with that, even though I was told that my bloodline was Cherokee. I felt like I was Lakota in a past life. And I know I was. I've been told that. Because that seemed familiar to me, more so than just my actual bloodline. When I would read about the ceremony and the healings that they did, and I would read about the language, it all seemed familiar, just like when I picked up the flute for the first time, how familiar it felt. So everything just kind of came to me, and at one point, this was about 20 years ago then, I met, at the time, his name was Standing Elk, Chief Standing Elk, the Sundance chief from the Yankton Sioux tribe. He was also a musician, but he was called to the spiritual path at one point in his life. So he put his music aside and became a very spiritual, guided person. And he was putting on conferences, and I was a featured performer at the time. And that's when I met him, became good friends with him, became close friends. We always called each other brother. And I participated in a lot of ceremony with him over the years. So he became my next teacher. And it was through him that I actually learned and participated in, and myself learned how to conduct some sacred ceremonies. So I've been a pipe carrier myself for 20 years. I've been conducting a sacred sweat lodge, the Inipi, for about 20 years. And it was last summer. I've been going to his Sundance for about 6 years. He, after 20 years, adopted me into his family and into his tribe. So that's where I have really felt comfortable among my teachings and my belief system. It was through the Dakota way, very similar with Dakota, Lakota, Nakota. It's all very similar. So that's where I am. Had it not been for my spiritual path, the music wouldn't have come.
So someone that's using the method of hollow bone, channeling, to bring through whatever they would bring through, do you think back in the days when the Native Americans were living on the land here in America, do you think they were bringing through, from discussions that you've had maybe, the kind of entities that, you know, modern day channelers are bringing through now? Or do you think it could have been a whole variety of ET spirits, you know, source, higher self?
From what I understand, and have been told from my teachers, my elders, back in the day, so to speak, it was the medicine man who would go on a vision quest, go on the hill for the purpose of channeling, so to speak. And I'm sure they didn't call it channeling back then. They went on this vision quest for the purpose of receiving information, which they considered to be coming from what you would call the source, from God, Creator, from the Lakota, Wakantaka, Wakantanka. This translation means the highest and most holy one. They would ask for this information. They would fast and pray for up to 4 days on a vision quest, waiting for this information to come so that they could take any messages, anything that had been brought to them, back to the people, and share that for the benefit of the tribe, whether or not they needed to be moving someplace else or what the future maybe held for them food-wise, or if new people were coming, Europeans were coming, what they needed to do to prepare for that. And maybe they went on a vision quest whenever they knew that they needed to get information. Or maybe they just went into a sweat lodge. Today, a lot of times we just go into ceremony, go into the sweat lodge, and receive messages that way. We don't necessarily have to go on a hill for 4 days. Typically, nowadays, somebody might do a vision quest once in their lifetime. Back then, the medicine man might do it more than once a year, just when the tribe needed information and guidance.
So some of that information that could have come through could have been quite profound, some of it.
I'm sure.
Lost in time now.
Lost in time now, yeah.
God, it would have been so interesting to find out just some of those, amazing shared moments which saved people's lives. Or
things were not recorded, written down.
No.
It was oral tradition.
Yeah.
And it was for the benefit of the tribe, not for the benefit of mankind, so to speak.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something in your event that you put on today as well, which was great, by the way, where you mentioned that the Native Americans were in communication, or there was a connection with the Palladians.
Many Native American tribes have origin stories that we came from the stars. The Lakota in particular, connection with the Pleiades, and I mentioned White Buffalo Calf Woman, who was believed to have come from the Pleiades and brought the gift of the sacred pipe to the people, which and in turn followed that the rites of the Oglala Sioux.
Wow. And that resonates for you, that does, doesn't it? You feel that to be true.
I do.
I'm sure I've heard other researchers, I think it was Dolores Cannon, I might be speaking in the context here, that did a book on something that was similar to that story. Incredible. And what do you do with that as a tribe? I mean, that was just accepted that could have been where they came from. But was there any communication, do you think, with...
Oh yeah. When I mentioned Chief Standing Elk, and by the way, his name has changed over the years. Currently, goes by Chief Golden Light Eagle. And he's also a hereditary chief. His father was actual chief of the tribe when the tribe was actually run by a chief. So when his father passed, he inherited his father's tribal bonnet. And when he does any tribal work, he goes by his father's name, Chief Black Spotted Horse. So he is one of the first Native Americans that came out about 25 years ago and openly started to talk about the long time history and ongoing connection between Native Americans and Star people. We don't call them aliens because we call them, they're part of the family. It's where we came from. So we call them Star people. And he has openly talked about it, been criticized for it, from his own people that say, no, this is our information, this is our background, we don't want it shared. But, those times have changed. We need to have people that are willing to share information for the benefit of mankind. And he's one of those people. You don't have to be Native American to believe that we're not alone in the universe. That's, a very common belief these days. The chief been featured on Ancient Aliens a couple of times, and been sought after and talked with various branches of the government about what he knows. But the connection is out there. You can go out to the reservations out west, and it's common for them to see starships overhead. I saw one time when I was out there. There's always been that openness, that ability to accept one another without fear. And that's why there's always been that connection between Native people and Star people. It's ancient. It's been going on for a long time between Star people and indigenous people from all over the world, from South America, from Peru. You know, we've seen all those shows about the images. Where did those images come from? They look like landing strips. So it's been around for a long time.
Yes, and that the chief that you mentioned there as well. He's still alive if he's on Ancient Aliens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God, it'd be interesting to speak to him one day as well.
Yeah, he's a what you would call a good channel, because when he goes into ceremony, when we go into Sweat Lodge, he'll frequently say, "This man just came in," or "A whale just came in." I call the whale One Eye because he's so big, you just see one eye. and he gets a message from them, and he shares that message with the people.
I wonder what the Native Americans, as a collective now, think of the way that we're treating Mother Earth.
I think it's become more of a human collective than just a Native American collective. You know, there's always been that connection from Native Americans to Mother Earth. But as a collective consciousness, we've realized how much damage we've done, how much we've taken and not given back. And that all comes from those ancient teachings of having that relationship with the earth, that we're just caretakers of the earth. There's a Lakota phrase, "Matako ye oasin," means we are all related. And Source spoke of it last night when you heard the meditation. We are the air is us. We are the earth is us. And the meditation went on to everything in not only on the earth or within the earth, that grows on the earth, that lives on the earth. It's all part of the web of life.
What was the main teaching of the native Indians, if they had a kind of, or a couple of main teachings?
A long time ago, those teachings were to live in peace and harmony with each other and the earth. And somewhere along the lines, those teachings got lost and we became separated from each other. And now everyone says we're at the fork in the road, so to speak, of which path mankind is going to choose. Whether we're going to choose the path of separation, the path of destruction, or if we're going to go back to the old ways and honor each other with love and respect and compassion and kindness and bring about the next age. Whether any tradition points to this time, this spiritual chapter, whether we're looking at the native tradition of going from one world into the next world, or if you're looking at the biblical tradition going through the tribulation, and then going into the 1,000 years of peace.
1,000 years of peace, that sounds beautiful, doesn't it?
We can only hope so.
It's achievable. It's achievable. It must be. It must be. And peace within ourselves, not just externally as well, but within. When you do the sweat lodges, do you find yourself connecting with your ancestors? Do you feel that connection?
We always feel that connection. when I conduct a sweat lodge, it's a prayer lodge. Sweat lodges can be done for different purposes. They can be done for healing purposes. So we're looking for a powerful medicine man to conduct that. They can be done just to pray. They can be done to receive messages. So they can be done for a variety of purposes. And it's probably the more common ceremony. And today, so many traditions have been adopted from one nation to another nation. And even through the Freedom of Religion Act, anybody is allowed to practice the religion that they want to. Native spirituality is not a religion, it's a way of life. And if you are conducting ceremony, you should at least know what you're doing. If you recall, in Arizona, what was that, 5-6 years ago, people died in a sweat lodge because the man that was conducting it was charging people an outrageous fee.
That's right. I remember. Yeah.
And it was a death trap to start with.
He was some big known person.
Yeah,
he was.
wouldn't let people out. It was an endurance test to see how hot people could stand it. The sweat lodge is never meant to be an endurance test. It's a spiritual experience and should be always conducted that way. It's never an endurance test. So you have to know what you're doing in ceremony.
So someone who's listening to this now is like, God, I really want to experience something like a sweat lodge. Where would they go to experience that?
You have to seek out a teacher with things like that. It's not like you can read a book and put up a sweat lodge and just start doing it. You have to be fortunate enough to find a teacher or to have a teacher come to you. It's like my experiences. You've heard the expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
That happened with me. So it's not something where you can just do it and take it upon yourself.
But obviously your speciality as well is obviously in the music.
It is.
And so you've got some beautiful instruments, which we're just putting up on the screen now. Were all these, how did these come about then? I mean, were these authentically made by native Indian people? Or?
Originally, the Native American flute's an ancient instrument. It can be traced back over 2,000 years. It was a courting instrument, not a ceremonial instrument. It was an instrument that a young man would play to attract the attention, to attract the heart of a young lady. Today there are many people that make the Native American flute. And being called the Native American flute doesn't always mean that it's made by a Native American. If you want a flute that's made by an enrolled member of a tribe, do a web search to get that. But there are a lot of great flute makers out there these days who are not Native Americans. Because to make a finely crafted Native American flute, you have to have a good woodworking shop. You have to have the funds and the money to invest in good equipment and resources to buy the raw materials. A lot of Native people are still struggling on reservations. They're still very poor and don't have the chance to do what other people do.
Yeah, I suppose we didn't cover that, did we? Actually, what's happened to the Native American people nowadays?
It's still a struggle. I mean, some of the reservations out west are like third world countries, especially with the Lakota and the Dakota people out there. You know, when the natives were put on those reservations out there, they were put there because that was the land that the white man had no use for. Today there are some native tribes that thrive because of casinos and have the money to give to their people for education, for health care. But if you look at the reservations out west on the Dakotas, there are still some very, very poor people out there, unfortunately.
And if people feel drawn to want to help them, is there any way they can do that, or?
There are organizations. You have to find one that's honestly putting the money where it needs to go.
Right.
I mean, any organization is probably going to take a little bit of the dollar just to run their things. But yeah, make sure that you get one that's, got good credentials, that's accredited, and it's got a good reputation of actually helping people. And there are those organizations out there.
Now, with your music, how many CDs have you done now?
I will have my 20th CD out this summer.
Incredible. And all those CDs, are they available from Amazon or your website?
From my website, douglasbluefeather.com. The music industry has changed drastically with downloads and streaming. So any place where you can get downloads, iTunes, any place that does streaming, Apple Music, Spotify, it's everywhere.
And so your music's just on your website?
Yeah.
Okay. So if people want to support you, and you ship internationally with those CDs?
I do. I mean, it's always nice to get an order directly from my website, but you can get my CDs through any place that distributes CDs. cdbaby.com is the biggest online retailer of CDs, from Adele to guys like me, independent artists. So it's out there.
Okay. Well, we're going to play out with one of your tracks. Was it a Palladian love song?
That's the one.
Yeah, we're going to play out with that. And is there any last message that you might like to give?
The Native American flute has been very spiritual to me. It's allowed me to touch people in a very good way. I've been blessed with winning a lot of awards, but probably the greatest gratification has come when somebody has emailed me and said, "Your music is what got me through the day. I'm going through a difficult illness, or my partner, spouse, husband is going through a very difficult time, very terminal illness maybe, and the music is the only thing that got me through the day." Or somebody who went through a relationship and went through a breakup and told me that music was what got them through the day. So to me, music is medicine, and the Native American flute to me has the ability to touch someone right in the heart. So I consider this a gift and a real honor to be of service.
Well, Douglas Bluefeather, thank you so much for joining us.
Bidamia.